right here is Zevia. Does the Zevia show up in the...
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Brandito and we happen to have the ginger ale flavor today. And essentially what it is it's the best soda you'll ever have. But it has 0 calories in it. And the way they do this is not what you might be thinking from a bunch of artificial flavors and chemicals. No. It's flavored with stevia. And stevia is it's an extract. It's a South American plant extract, basically, that has 1 less molecule of sugar. And it actually, oddly enough, random factoid, it's very good for your teeth, very good for dental hygiene. And it has 0 calories, and it's not going to give you that sugar crash or any of those complicated side effects that you get from saccharin or aspartame. Like they were doing some studies about aspartame, long-term usage of aspartame. You know all about that, yeah, Brendan. But yeah, I don't know, you guys should check that out. Long-term studies of aspartame on humans and rats do not look good. All sorts of really negative side effects. But this way you can get your soda and your thrills from drinking a soda without any of the consequences of actually drinking a soda. So it's beautiful. So to that, I'm going to go ahead and, yes, cheers. All right. Hi, I'm Cheyenne Adamson, and welcome back to the Yes Phonics channel, where homeschoolers, teachers, and educators everywhere come for valuable teaching information and insights. So I've been reading a book every teacher, homeschooler, and educator should read. It's Diane Ravitch's The Death and Life of the Great American School System. And it makes a compelling case for more teacher autonomy and less standardized testing. And at first, I'm not going to lie to you guys, I didn't really want to read it upon hearing the idea that Diane puts forward is that competition doesn't bolster innovation. A little bit about me, I'm a huge free market guy. I really like the idea that you put forth an idea into the marketplace, and the marketplace, consisting of customers, decides whether or not that idea is good, and then you kind of suss out the pros and the cons of that idea, and then if it is great, then it flourishes. If it doesn't, it dies, essentially. And so when she started talking about how competition in the school setting, in the educational setting, wouldn't actually help bolster better schools and better teachers, I was a little taken aback. I was like, I don't know if this is something that I'm going to read. But then I decided, you know what, I'll put my prejudices aside and I'll just go ahead and hear her out. And I'm certainly glad that I did, because I have learned a lot from reading that book, and I have a completely different outlook on what an educational setting should be like when you're considering competition and whether or not to use that in that setting. Competition is one of the most integral things that stimulates production, innovation, and quality, while simultaneously decreasing price. You can check out Poe Bronson and Ashley Merriman's Top Dog, great book, for more evidence on how competition is not only necessary in our everyday lives, but without it, we'd still be living in the Stone Ages. And I firmly believe this. Not only is competition important in the adult world, but it's especially important for developing children. I also don't necessarily agree that privatization is a bad thing if it's in the hands of competent individuals. I'm sure there will be some people who disagree with that and some people who agree with that. But that is just my opinion, and I like being transparent with my opinions, you guys, so I can give you my opinion, and then I can also kind of, as much as I can, give you the facts and the information. But you know where I stand. I'm not trying to be covert. I'm not trying to shoehorn in an agenda without you guys knowing about it. You'll know exactly what I think about everything every time. And with that being said, enough preamble. After getting over my ego tantrum that I talked about earlier about, the competition and not working in schools, I picked up the book again and continued reading it. And to my amazement, Ravitch succinctly diagnoses the problem that teachers face on a daily basis: too much bureaucratic control and way too many standardized tests. And I think probably every teacher at this point, Brandon, is going, yeah, too many tests. Because it's awful. She really paints a stark picture. Just to be clear, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not getting a commission in any way, shape, or form to recommend Diane Ravitch's book or the book Top Dog. I'm not getting paid to do any of that. I just like to recommend fantastic books, as you guys have seen in my previous videos, when I get the chance, so I do it. But Ravitch here, she outlines a clear and concise plan of action, which gives teachers control of tests and how they administer them, and to give them more autonomy in their classrooms so that they can do what they do best, which is teach. The idea that teachers should be confined to a national curriculum like No Child Left Behind or Common Core Standardized Core is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous in more than one way. But let's start with the biggest and most glaring inconsistency first, which is to assume that a one-size-fits-all curriculum is going to be a success for every single and individualistic child. And Ravitch uses an excellent metaphor. One child might run a mile in 5 minutes, and another child might run a mile in 10 minutes, but both of these children have very different needs. Unfortunately, those are proponents of Common Core or national curriculums. They often overlook common sense, that children aren't the same, and a one-size-fits-all approach can't possibly work. On this premise alone, it's easy to see why standardized testing and mandating that schools get to this level of scores or your funding is cut and we fire everyone is falling short. This is happening everywhere, all the time, and it's awful. And I'm sure as a teacher, comment below if you've been a teacher and you've been in the situation where they've introduced these outrageously strict standards and you've seen a lot of your fellow colleagues go by the wayside. Let us know in the comment section below. We really want to talk about this. This is a huge issue. Another even more important reason why teachers should have autonomy in the classroom is the simple fact that when resources are focused on actually training teachers extensively in their field of study, instead of training them on ideology, insert Department of Education, they're competent individuals who can teach their students to the highest degree, which in turn produces well-rounded, highly educated, critical thinking-enabled individuals. If teachers don't have the flexibility to teach in a way that not only helps students, but also suits their very individualistic needs, some students need more help than others and vice versa, well, we don't have much of a functioning education system. If the standards, and when I say standards, I mean test scores, are utopian, obviously the results will fall short. But if standards are realistic, let's say, teachers and students will have a much better chance of success. That seems obvious, but I don't know why these bureaucrats at the top have no grasp of this idea, Brandon. It really eludes me, really baffles me, boggles my mind.
Suited devils.
They are. Yes, they are. If standardized testing versus teacher autonomy have a one-size-fits-all curriculum that is mandated by the state or federal government, the students who are bright will be held back by the students who are struggling. It's really that simple. The problem with having a common standard is that the standard has to be low. And I'm sorry, you guys. I realize that this is kind of controversial, and maybe it's really not even controversial, but we're in a time where this statement could be seen as controversial. There are bright students, and as I'm sure you as teachers have had this experience, there are bright students and there are students who just aren't quite as bright. So it's one of those unfortunate realities. I wish kids could be all geniuses, and then it would be utopic, even though it's not possible to have a utopia. But if everybody was a genius, I'd kind of like to see that world, man.
If everyone was a genius, they could then just teach to the youngsters on their own. There would be no need for an educational system. So perhaps, with that being said, they're trying to keep the educational system as a necessity while also keeping standards low, so that, it's kind of just dumbing down the society so that, the suited devils, as we were calling them, can maintain
their power and control.
Yeah, that's a whole nother kind of worms.
Yeah, it is, but it's food for thought, though.
That's another video.
So this is just another example of how having a federalized one-size-fits-all curriculum doesn't help teachers or students at all. It de-incentivizes teachers because they're not able to teach in a way that is flexible. The very nature of teaching relies on flexibility, which I'm sure you guys very well know this. And teachers have to be flexible to address the differing needs of their students. And it amazes me that bureaucrats still don't understand this. This is going to be a common theme throughout this video, you guys. I just don't understand bureaucrats at all. And I'm sure you guys don't either. A case in point example of a national federal mandated curriculum going awry was in 2012 with Beverly Hall in Atlanta. She was a superintendent of all schools in Atlanta. She was having incredible, or seemingly so, incredible success with her students, even with the No Child Act left behind, which was then at that point a mandate. And it was an earlier version, which I'm sure you guys are probably well aware of. It was an earlier version of what we have now, which is Common Core. However, it was discovered that widespread cheating had infiltrated the standardized tests, but not from the students. It came from none other than, yeah, you guessed it, came from Beverly Hall herself. So in order to get those utopian test scores, here's the crux of the whole matter. This perfectly illustrates why standardized testing in Common Core doesn't work. This example right here. I mean, there's lots of examples, but this example, I feel, definitely proves this. In order to get those utopian test scores, she instructed her staff of teachers to mark answers right that were actually wrong. And this is what happens when you try to mandate something that is impossible from the onset. Essentially, the only ones who profit from all of this are the billionaires and the mega billionaires in the standardized testing industry. They simply don't care about the success of students or teachers, and only their own coffers, their own pockets. Even Tom Lovelace, a former 6th grade teacher and Harvard policy professor who's an expert on student achievement, education policy, and reform in K-12 schools, said that standards don't matter that much and that essentially Common Core was going to be a failure. It's a disaster. And I'm not using this as an appeal to authority fallacy argument at all, but the fact that somebody with the authority to speak on this subject is telling the bureaucrats in Washington that this is garbage and isn't going to work is incredible. But yet they don't listen. Now, I realize that I have a lot of homeschoolers who watch these videos, and so I'm happy to say that this hardly affects you at all. Actually, it's great. Other than the fact that your children have to interact with other children who are being robbed of a good education, but I digress. Keep on homeschooling and fighting the good fight. And as it turns out, a recent study came out proving what most homeschoolers secretly suspected, that homeschooled children are actually smarter than children educated by the state. And of course, there are all the caveats. I'm not saying that this is a cut and dry rule across the board, but it stands to reason homeschoolers can provide the detailed, tailored curriculum that other public school parents just can't, or the school teachers just can't because of the aforementioned federal mandates and all that. So going the homeschooling route is still a 100% recommended route. And it's not for everybody, but it is a great route if you want that tailored, specific education for your child and you want to have complete control of that. It's a great way to do that. I know some people out there might be skeptical about all of this. The government knows best, right? I mean, why would there be people at the top instituting these standards if they didn't have some merit base or some sort of data or some sort of merit behind them, right? But this is the unfortunate reality that we live in, that a very few people at the top in government a lot of the times don't have the best interests at all. And honestly, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. There's probably a lot of you who already know this, so thank you for bearing with me. But for those of you who do still believe that there aren't nefarious agendas within government and that they're just looking out for the kids and that they're all about the children, like, no, they're definitely not. But that's just my own personal diatribe at this point, so I digress. Well, there is somebody out there, an entity, who is actually walking the walk and talking the talk, besides homeschoolers, of course. And that's the New York Performance Standards Consortium. A great example of a waive your purchase, exempting them from the national standards or Common Core, is this group. They've administered their own assessments in the form of portfolios, essays, and research projects instead of using standardized tests. They enroll the same number of impoverished students as other public schools do, but they have a much higher graduation rate. And to top that off, suspension rate and teacher turnover rate are much lower. In essence, these 28 schools demonstrate accountability by long-term results, not by annual testing. Now, this is so important to understand that they're doing the exact opposite of what the mainstream public education system is doing, and it's working fabulously. To put this into perspective, Diane Ravitch, the aforementioned author of this book that we're talking about today, met with Finnish educator Pasi Sahlberg and discussed the idea of accountability. As it turns out, the Finnish education system doesn't even have the language or ideology in their teaching system at all, as far as the standardized testing goes. Instead, Sahlberg stated that they have a word that comes close: responsibility. So, in other words, they don't even have accountability in their dialect at all for the education system. Something similar, responsibility. And I'm kind of curious, what is this responsibility? So Sahlberg then went on to more in depth, to explain it a little bit more in depth. She went on to say, all of our teachers take responsibility for their work. Those two ideologies are worlds apart. One suggests punishment, while the other suggests freedom. Ravitch then visited Finland the next year and witnessed firsthand the marvels of the Finnish education system. Children received 15 minutes of recess between each class. Ravitch also witnessed children participating in jazz bands, film classes where they learned to make their own videos. She saw firsthand what the Finnish were doing. Test scores held absolutely no sway whatsoever, but students were engaged and eager to learn. And she witnessed something entirely different and arguably superior. Something even more important, though, than how they operate in Finnish education is why they operate. The Finns have an attitude of building and sustaining competent and well-educated teachers that society at large respects. They also have the children's well-being in mind, something that's so important, but yet somehow very, very hollow in today's American education system. Even though we routinely say it's all for the children. The power of solutions. What are some of the solutions to the problem of the standardized tests and teacher autonomy? A step in the right direction would be to scrap the idea, and the government program, of making everything about test scores. That's obviously failed. We just need to do away with it right now. But it's gotten to the point now that standardized testing is the end-all be-all. And it's simply fallacious. States should have curriculum guidelines, but not mandated guidelines. Teachers should have a general idea on what subjects to teach and which grade, and this will ensure that teachers everywhere have the flexibility and autonomy, but they'll have a general guideline as well. This will also ensure that students who move from state to state won't repeat courses that they've already taken. We also have to trust them to know their students and understand them as professionals. Punishing teachers with accountability is foolish and has not been proven to work. So let's get back to the good old days of allowing teachers to actually do their job. Let's let teachers actually teach their students without being hampered by red tape and bureaucratic nonsense. Let's say no to Common Core. Let's say no to more bureaucratic control. Let's just say yes to more teacher autonomy, and teachers need more autonomy. Teachers need autonomy. Teachers need autonomy. And that's pretty much the end of today's video, you guys. Thank you so much for... I don't get paid for this either. Just wanted you to know that. Not getting paid to promote Zevia. But thank you so much for sticking through this really rather longer video. Some of these are long, but I do feel like the information is pertinent and does have a place. And we are talking about very important issues, so I hope you enjoyed it. And feel free to leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. But I'd actually really like to see comments, for sure. Are you a teacher, like I asked about earlier in the video? Have you seen this affect your school? Have you been a teacher who, due to federally regulated mandates from Common Core, were fired from your job because you couldn't get to that golden mandate of test scores? Have you seen the drop-off in other subjects in class, such as social studies and art and English and all these other studies? Like, have you seen the progression from how it used to be to now? I'd love to hear your story. Fill us in on the nitty-gritty details. That would be great. And until next time, my fellow educators, I hope you're well. I hope all of you are well out there right now. Stay well and stay classy. Catch you next time. Later.